The Next Power.
Hello, welcome to The Next Power. Today we have a pleasure to meet our guest today, Donatus.
Hi. Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a great few days. For the first time, everybody can own a piece of communities, of a mission statement, of whatever you want to create, and at the same time contribute to it.
How will it change the world?
You're all of a sudden unifying people from all over the world, from every single element, culture, economy.
China coming from developing countries and come directly to the leaders with the Web2, with the internet economy.
Developing countries have a far bigger opportunity here, in my view, than the West.
It gives all the nation at the same starting line.
It's called Caldorianism, or Caldorian economy model. You've seen it in Japan, you've seen it in Korea, Japan in the 60s.
And Web3 provided for opportunities for countries like Vietnam.
And that's why I'm looking at Vietnam so keen, because Vietnam has this opportunity.
Vietnam is among the top country, although with crypto and the others blockchain application.
It's not about the fast money grab. That's exactly what's going to damage the industry.
And the companies who want to be successful, they should have to have a big capability to build international community right at the beginning.
Think of it like a real business, but have fun with it like a blockchain business.
Thank you so much for participating in this small discussion. Our audience would love to know more about you.
Sure. So I'm the co-founder of 3.0 Labs, which is a blockchain-based venture studio. What we're basically doing is we're taking any application within the blockchain space that we see, and we're consistently building projects and businesses to facilitate this. And this is usually around the space of DAOs, around certain industrial applications, but also around applications that might not have been fully discovered yet. So what we're looking at with our broader mission is to try and enable resource access to the world. And that's where we're looking also very keenly at Vietnam.
That's absolutely great. So what is your first impression about this country?
I have to say I am very impressed.
So what is it?
It's a beautiful country for one, but aside from that, I think that we've all heard about the incredible pace in which things move in Vietnam and how it's developing as an economy. But to be here, I was very surprised to say that it feels extremely structured, clean, and obviously fast moving. And so that was my first impression when I got here.
Here comes some questions from the audience.
Hi, The Next Power talk show. Hi, Donatus. I'm Jamil. And my question is, from a foreign investor's point of view, what do you think are Vietnamese companies' advantages over foreign firms? Thank you.
Thank you. One of the things that struck me about them was that much more so than in the West, where we usually look at business models and start thinking out a long-term plan and strategizing and using models that we have known in the past, the startup community around here, or the entrepreneurs here, are extremely creative and witty about the way that they go things. So they might see opportunities where others don't, and they find solutions in a very hustly manner, which I quite enjoy.
Hello, my name is Paul, and I have a question for the Next Power talk show regarding blockchain technology. It's obviously a really trendy buzzword right now, but I'm curious for your perspective on exactly what is it, and how does it work? And what is its potential to change the world?
Oh, there's a lot to unpack there. For one, I like to refer to it as Web3, which is this umbrella term that encapsulates how services and products are built using blockchain technologies. Web3 for us can mean several things, but I guess the thing that means the most to me personally and to us as a company is this idea of a stakeholder economy. It's the thought that if, for example, you have a gentleman here in Vietnam who might be subject to certain individuals loaning him money. The interest rate on that money might be extremely high, and he might be reduced to working every single day, paying off his loan, and then coming home and paying his food and feeding his family, and then he's got nothing left. Why? Because he doesn't have access to international resources, because he cannot open a bank account, because he cannot take a loan. Unlike the most of us in the West, which are very privileged in that aspect, there's a lot of people, especially in Southeast Asia, that just quite simply lack it. But they all have a smartphone. So using blockchain technologies, they can interact, they can take loans, or they can give loans, they can invest, they can trade, all without having to know who the counterpart is, because all that counterparty risk is removed from blockchain. So that is one aspect. It's this idea of this trustless coordination, this trustless trade between individuals. The second aspect that's particularly fascinating to me right now is this idea of a stakeholder economy, or what most people know as DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. It's still very young. There's been a few DAOs around. There's been a lot of experimentation, and we have a lot to figure out around how they work. But what's amazing about it is that in Web 2, you had this model of, I provide you a service which you don't pay for, but your attention and your data is mine, and that's what I monetize. And therefore, your incentive to work towards me, be it a platform, is because I give you an emittance of serotonin and dopamine whenever you use my platform. But here, all of a sudden, the blockchain looks at something totally different. It looks at how can we incentivize huge masses of people by investing and being a part and owning a part of this community. And then by owning a part, that's their incentive. They suddenly want to contribute, and they suddenly want to be a part of this bigger community. And we call this the stakeholder economy, because for the first time, everybody can own a piece of communities, of a mission statement, of whatever you want to create, and at the same time contribute to it.
Yes. With Web3, the opportunities for developing countries and developed countries, is there any difference?
Developing countries have a far bigger opportunity here, in my view, than the West. Sure, the West has financial resources, and it has a lot of resources in around the educational space and government grants. But it has too stable an infrastructure, if that makes sense. Why is that a problem? Quite simply because we need to take down several layers of infrastructure in order to implement anything. If in Germany, for example, we were to say, I think that a centrally bank-issued digital currency, or CBDC, should be issued, it would take us 10 years or more to even get marginally close to that, because there are so many layers of our economy that would be threatened by this. So it actually wouldn't be very attractive. But in a country like Vietnam, that's a whole different story. Because, as we were already mentioning, a lot of people don't have access to financial resources, and the government is very directly involved in the economy. So there's an opportunity for the government to actually create things and to just leapfrog, to skip all the steps that we had in the West and basically get one step ahead right away.
Yes. That's a story we have seen in the last 20 years with China, with Web 2.
Absolutely right.
China coming from developing countries and come directly to the leaders with the Web 2, with the internet things, with the internet economy. And Web 3 provided for opportunities for countries like Vietnam. It gives all the nation at the starting line, in the same starting line. And now it's a matter of innovation and application. And with the countries with big population like Vietnam, Web3 give every single one in the community more opportunities, more control on their interaction on that digital world, rather than Web 2.
That's right.
Yes, and it gives opportunities for people to do in business. Within Web 2 or in Web 1, the opportunities somehow concentrated to bigger players. But with Web 3, especially for the economy with big population, it seems that a lot of opportunities there. But to realize the vision for the future, still a long way to go. So what is it? What is the bridge that we have to cross?
Absolutely right. Well, you know very much about this. I should interview you next time.
Thank you.
It's completely right. There's a huge shift that you're looking at, and you were explaining China and how we've seen it over the last 20 years, basically leapfrog. It's called Caldorianism, or Caldorian economy model. You've seen it in Japan, you've seen it in Korea. Japan in the 60s, revolutionized the shipping industry by basically taking the knowledge and resources from the United States, which was the leader at the time, and just going straight to work where they left off. And therefore, the only thing that they had to improve on was the efficiency of implementation. And see, that's the same thing that we're looking at here. And that's why I'm looking at Vietnam so keenly, because Vietnam has this opportunity. They see the blockchain. The problem is there, and the blockchain can be a solution. So you've got a product market fit. You just need to figure out a way to implement it. And I would recommend that in a similar way as Japan has done and as China has done at some point, you take the resources at our hand. People in Europe and the United States that are offering their hand to collaborate to build this Web3 economy in Vietnam and become front runner in the space.
Yes. If we look at the developing countries, neighboring countries in Southeast Asia and the other part of Asia and around the world, how do you see Vietnam have the differentiator or the advantage on the Web3 economy?
That's unfortunately, I'm not too familiar with most other Southeast Asian countries, but I do know that Cambodia has introduced the Bac Hong in 2019, which was a great front runner. So in a certain aspect, Cambodia has already taken a step forward. The main difference here is that Vietnam has a much more enthusiastic population towards the broader Web3 space. Let's not forget that Web3 is a huge environment. There's so many different sectors. You know, there's DeFi, there's DAOs, there's NFTs, there's tokens, and there's many more to come. All underneath these, it's a second economy more than it is an industry. And if you're looking at it from that perspective, then Vietnam can very much take on one of those sectors and dominate, or multiple ones. What you've seen in Cambodia, however, is just a simple proof of concept to the idea of the blockchain. In this case, the CBDC Bac Hong. When they implemented it, they looked at an environment that's one-to-one the same as Vietnam. 40% of the population didn't have access to financial resources, and 95% had a smartphone. So what's the obvious solution? A digital currency that's, however, controlled by government. And as soon as they implemented it, the transaction volume rose by 250%, 350% actually. And the transaction quantity rose by 250%. So it had an immediate effect. And what's more to that, the government was now able to in real time monitor its own economy. Now, CBDCs are a controversial topic, but what I'm trying to highlight here is just this idea of blockchain can have a humongous and immediate impact that allows you to take action much, much more efficiently than beforehand. And I feel like Vietnam is well poised for that.
Yes, I share on the same opinion with what you're saying about Vietnam. What I'm looking at it, actually Vietnam has some preparation with Web2. With digital commerce, and the certain young people, educated one, has some training, has some practice with Web2. This is a foundation for when we come into Web3. Because if we don't have the foundation, the preparation with entrepreneur, with the way we build business model in Web2, then it takes a while for the entrepreneurs to understand and to build a business model, to running those business model and realize it in reality. But somehow they have already have that step during the last 10 years, and now come to Web3. Somehow the young people, the young tech guys, seems very energetic. And that's the reason why during the last 2 years we can see that Vietnam is among the top country, although with crypto and the others blockchain application. Yes, of course, there's different way to look at that. But from a personal point of view, I see the eagerness. I can see the enthusiasm and also the risk-taking of trying new things.
I find that super interesting to hear from your side because I've been noticing something similar. The developer background here is huge. And I find it hard to believe, so tell me if I'm wrong, but somebody told me that the average age in Vietnam is 27.
Yes, more than 60% of our population is under 35 years old.
Well, that's a huge potential right there. And so, of course, they see the opportunity in Web3, and what's more, there's so many tools out there, so many internet computers, if you will, like Ethereum, that allow people to experiment with new models, which is great in principle, but of course has to be taken, as you're correctly mentioning, with a grain of salt. There are a lot of scams out there. There's a lot to be discovered. There's a lot of faulty applications of blockchain where it really doesn't belong. So if I were to say anything to the people our age in Vietnam who are developing around the blockchain application, it's not about the fast money grabs. That's exactly what's going to damage the industry. We've seen all this just for the second time. What you should be focusing on is how you can help everybody in the country, which is exactly what this technology is about. And then asks a simple question, does it actually need a blockchain?
Yes.
Because sometimes it doesn't.
That's what we have seen in the late 90s and early 2000s with .com.
Yes.
Okay, but after the .com burst,
exactly,
what really matters, what really meaningful to our life, to the economy, is starting to grow. Yeah. And it changed the world for the last 20 years.
100%.
Okay? And that's what my feelings at this time when I look at Web3.
Yeah. There's already big companies coming out of Vietnam like Axie Infinity, which was the biggest play-to-earn game in the world. It's absolutely humongous. And of course, that was an experiment, and maybe it wouldn't have worked out, where it's yet to be answered. But the principle is that people are willing to experiment with this. And I do thoroughly believe something that's being echoed amongst the community quite frequently right now, which is this thought that we're now witnessing the second big crash, which is, let's call it the NFT and DeFi crash, or NFT crash, not DeFi. And the companies that come out of this, the ones who work now during the winter time, if you will, and build in Web3, those are going to be the next Googles, the next Amazons, the next Facebooks, but from a Web3 perspective. And I'm looking at people here in Vietnam and they're building. And that's what's getting me excited, because the next Google might come from here.
If you look at the bus for Web2, okay, we have two models.
Yeah.
The American model and later Chinese model somehow become a leader.
Yeah.
Okay. So for this time with Web3, in your opinion, where will be the dominant model?
I think
Asia, American, Europe, or somewhere else?
That's a
Chinese.
Maybe Chinese.
Yes.
I think for Web3, we have to reinvent how we think about these things. You see, in Web 2, everything was centralized, right? So you had Google, you had Alibaba. Amazon and Alibaba, the two big competitors in their individual spaces, and they both dominated, like massive. But now we're not looking at this anymore. We're now looking at communities. We're looking at decentralization. So maybe it's not so much about which company comes out, but which community does. And sure, I can see that a prevalent amount will come from Asia, for sure, because there's just this opportunity to experiment. But I don't think that it will be restricted to a single boundary. I think that it will live in the internet. It's what some people call the metaverse, but let's not go there just yet. This idea of a second economy, a second digital economy on top of the one that we currently exist in, where people can interact and trade and have identities that are protected, where the data is owned by them individually, and where communities form decentralized environments where people can interact.
Yes, I love the idea about the centralization in Web 2.
Yeah.
And the openness.
Yeah.
The democratization to the large population and the cross-border. There's no border. This is not about the national border. Yeah. It is about the synergy. It is about the value that we bring to the large community in the digital space.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, I mean, you're a businessman, so you know how many times during any interaction with anyone abroad or within your country is the question of counterparty risk brought in. How many safety measures have we put in with lawyers, contracts, insurance, security auditing, any of the above? Every single one of these points is a cost, it's an administrative element, and it's a difficulty that might disincentivize somebody from trading. But with Web3, you don't have that. Remove the counterparty risk, and all of a sudden you can have this borderless interaction because you can trust anybody without ever knowing them. And that's very, very enticing because it allows a lot more velocity. It allows a lot more interaction between individuals. And if you're looking at it from a broader economic perspective, then I would dare say this removal or automation of the administrative element could even mean that even if you go into a recession or a crisis, you'll get out of it significantly faster than ever before in history. Very interesting at this point.
Yes. And we can see that, I mean, the new generation of entrepreneur, of startup for Web3, actually had to think about their cross-border community right at the beginning, which is very much different from Web2. In Web2, we're thinking about the community, and normally it is locally dominant. And then you build the expansion. But Web3, actually there's a borderless right at the beginning. And the companies who want to be successful, they should have to have a capability to build international community right at the beginning.
I love that you touched on that topic, because it's something that honestly gets me quite frequently. One of the things that struck me, I come from a very rural area of Germany, which has a museum, and this museum has been struggling at times with attracting new visitors or figuring out new ways to do things. One of the things that struck me with Web3, just as an idea, or with DAOs specifically, was this thought that with a DAO, you're turning business models on their head almost, it seems like, right? If you and I start a business, then the first thing that we'll look at is product market fit. We'll look at the viability of the business model. We'll look at the money that we need to raise, and we'll look at the long-term vision and plan so that we can adjust whatever strategy we take to that long-term vision. Those are the foremost important things at the very beginning. But in a DAO, you take it upside down and you say, here's our mission, now let's build the community, as in our customers almost, and then, you know, figure it out as you go along. And that might be right, that might be wrong, it's yet to be answered, but the main point here is that you're all of a sudden unifying people from all over the world, from every single element, around the common cause. So if I were to go back to my museum in Germany and say, let's create the Friends of the Museum DAO, and I do this in my surrounding, then I might get 4 people to be members. But if I throw this out in the world and I say each of us, we put in €2, and now we all own a stake in the Friends of the Museum DAO, and now all of us are going to contribute because the value of that stake is going to rise as we all contribute to this because we're all incentivized, then I can attract 12,000, 24,000 people, which in the broader context of the global population is nothing, but for this individual mission is a lot. And that's very, very interesting.
Thank you very much. So during the last 3 days in Vietnam, so what's your impression about the companies, the startup in Web3, in blockchain technology in Vietnam?
They're very enthusiastic and very inventive. One of the things that I noticed was that the majority of the companies that we've met so far, or so it seems, in Vietnam were focused on blockchain gaming. And when I asked a certain individual, why is it that a lot of Vietnamese companies focus on blockchain gaming? He says, because it's meditative and because it's addictive to the individual, not in a bad way, because it allows you to interact with others and to express yourself in different ways. And that was interesting, because if you believe in that broader vision of the metaverse, which again is yet to be defined, then the way that people are going to get onboarded to this is via gaming. And if Vietnam then becomes the gateway to that, then you know, it's a pretty good way to go.
I think gaming is just a very initiative, very first step for Web3.
Absolutely.
Okay. Especially because we have a young population, and many of young population, they spend quite a lot of time with gaming. And that's the reason why they will be the first mover, the trendsetter. Later on, from those trendsetters, there will be more and more followers. Just like I am from 40 years old, coming and follow with more daily life application of blockchain and Web3.
Absolutely. And you know, one of the things that we've noticed over the last few cycles, cryptocurrencies was the first one. It attracted a certain demographic of people, which was very small, mostly Western, libertarian, pseudo-anarchistic, you know, anti-government people. And then came the next wave, and people came in and they realized, oh wow, these things are smart contracts. That's really interesting. I can now build apps in any form whatsoever. I can now create decentralized organizations, fundraising mechanisms, NFTs, whatever it is. In came the next wave, and you had the creators. And the creators influenced huge masses. But the problem was that most people around the world were still stuck to these pseudo-anarchistic individuals that came at the very, very beginning, who now only made up maybe 0.5% of the population. And they have every right to be there, for sure. And they're very right in their views that a blockchain is usually decentralized, usually, not always. But they're not the masses anymore. The people are coming from all sorts of backgrounds now. It's one of the things I love about this space. You'll find somebody from every industry and every background coming together. Now, gaming is going to be the next one in many ways, because gaming is so far-reaching. It's so far beyond art, which was very widely accepted, and obviously everybody loves art. But gaming has this humongous trade opportunity, because if you're going to a game that's not pay to play and you're interacting with others, then every single penny that you spend is one that is going to create more volume for the entire ecosystem. and multiply that by thousands, and you have people coming in and interacting with lots of different features, all of which are an individual sector of blockchain. So gaming could actually combine so many of these features that we're currently exploring and just make it so much larger. And that's why people are talking about the metaverse so much.
Okay. So if you have advice for the blockchain community here in Vietnam, so what are your advices?
My advice would be, don't think about the short term.
Okay, good.
Lots of projects in the blockchain industry look at 3 months. They don't really think beyond that. And with DAOs, of course, there was this feature that I was mentioning. But I'm a hypocrite because I say it myself, but you might have noticed that lots of these businesses, projects are called projects, not businesses. Yes. And that indicates that people are thinking about it in a short-term time frame. We need to start thinking long-term. So when you're building up a blockchain business, don't think about, this is what it does, these are my customers, and this is what the token is going to do. Think about, how is this going to continue to create value for everybody 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Think of it like a real business, but have fun with it like a blockchain business.
Blockchain is an economic sector. Opportunities for populous countries, personal interactions, Web 3.0 borderless model. Gaming is just an initial step.
Thank you so much, Donatus, for joining us. Although this is a very short section, we learned a lot from your insight.
Thank you so much.
Okay. And thank you so much for joining us at The Next Power.
Cùng The Next Power, khám phá những câu chuyện đổi mới sáng tạo vào mỗi thứ năm. Cảm ơn sự cố vấn nội dung của IBP.
The Next Power.